You say they may be making the best of a bad situation, but it's not just about trade, and that's really important to realize. If it were just about trade, you look at the size of the European economy, the size of the American economy, how much Europe trades, how much U.S. trades. Europe should be paid to trade with the United States rather than the other way around. Europe should have gotten the better deal. Europe got a bad deal. Absolutely. But what was this about? Defense. Europe is at war. They know they're at war. U.S. knows that it's war. Europe has not gotten the defense capacity to fight on its own. Everybody should have been aware that the U.S. was not a reliable partner back in 2017 when Trump came to power first, but they didn't take on board that lesson. And this is the best deal they could get. But they should remember, any deal with Trump is not worth the paper that it's written on. And I don't know if you've seen, not long after that deal, it wasn't signed, but it was spoken, whatever you call it, agreed to, the U.S. says, oh, by the way, you have to get rid of all your digital regulations, your DSA, your DMA, your digital taxes in some countries. You have to get rid of all that. All the things that you have tried to do to protect you in the new digital economy. And I've talked to officials in the EU, and it's been in the media. Europe says it's not giving up its national sovereignty. So where does it place you? You made a deal. It was the best deal you could at the moment. But you're going to be back at the drawing board. There's going to be a demand for you give up your national sovereignty or we're going to tariff you more.
Unpacking what you just said, I'll tackle the defence side of things or war side of things, depending on whether you're Mr. Hegseth at the moment, because I understand that the Department of Defence is now going to be called the Department of War, as it has been for a lot of its history. But in terms of the Europeans, they got a great deal out of the Americans for decades, post-1945 as well. It is only right that Europe should actually have more funding, more spending on its own defence. And the President and various presidents have been right on that front, haven't they?
That's right. I mean, the fact of the matter is we still, the basic unit of our world is the nation state. And Europe needs to have its own national sovereignty. And having national sovereignty means you have to have, in today's world, a defense force, and you can't be as dependent as Europe is with the United States, and even on areas of trade. Now, to give Europe its due, no one really expected a land war in Europe. No one expected this, and so you can't be too critical of Europe being a little bit relaxed. I think everybody thought, that kind of war was over. We have our nuclear defense.
I want to part of that conversation because there's a lot to talk about there, but I also want to talk about what you're speaking about here, because I think you're going to make some really interesting interventions today, including talking about the new order. And I think one of your lines is chaos is not an alternate to what we had previously. Just expand upon that for our viewers.
Well, since World War II, we've been trying to create a rules-based international economic law. We created institutions, we created a body of international economic law, imperfect. I've criticized it a lot, but I criticized it from the point of view, I think there needs to be an international rule of law. I just wanted it to be fair, and particularly fair to developing countries, emerging markets. All the power was in the U.S. U.S. was writing these rules. And now...
Joe, it was your first book I read, Globalization and Its Discontents. I read it 25 years ago, I think.
Exactly. And now, who's giving the complaint? The U.S. says the laws that we wrote were unfair to the United States. Now, come on.
So you were looking for a post-Washington consensus that made it fairer to others. The U.S. is looking for a post-Washington consensus that endorses the primacy of the U.S.?
Exactly. And to extract for the U.S. more of the value of the global supply chains that have contributed to making us better off. And in the process of trying to extract more rents out of those global supply chains, they're killing them. And the result of that is there's chaos, and I think we have to accept that our pace of increases of standard of living will be slower and probably maybe even go down for a while.
What does it mean for the primacy of the dollar? A lot of people have called some form of loss of reserve currency status for the dollar. They've called it a long time, and it's never happened. And people talk about alternative currencies as well, and for a whole host of reasons, none of them have ever succeeded. But is the dollar going to be in a perpetual stage of weakness, as far as you can see, for the short term or medium term?
Yes, I think that. And the dollar would have lost its status if there were another good global currency. Europe has done some things that have increased the confidence in the euro, but they're still, Europe is not one country, and the euro crisis was obviously a traumatic event. China has capital controls. China is the largest trading economy, and so were it not for the capital controls and more confidence in China, that we would have a Chinese reserve as a reserve currency. But the dollar, I'm actually surprised that it's done as well in some ways. Let me tell you why. The chairman of the Federal Reserve, chairman of the Council of Economic Advisors of Donald Trump, who's now just been through his hearings for being a member of the Federal Reserve, holding both positions, on leave from one, a member of the other, and saying he believes in the independence of the Fed, and a president who does not believe in the independence of the Fed. That means you have the regulation of the dollar done in a way that's been different from what it's been done in the past. So you have political control by a real estate developer who knows no economics, whose main love is low interest rates and couldn't care less about a little bit of inflation or a lot of inflation, doesn't care how the tariffs are causing inflation. And then this guy writes something called the Mar-a-Lago Accord. The Mar-a-Lago Accord is a wonderful proposal to get the dollar down, but even worse, says we will invite countries to exchange their T-bills for century bonds yielding zero interest rates. Wonderful deal. And if you don't do that, you may lose U.S. security and will impose tariffs.